Hello, this is Michael Beach, and welcome to the What Are You Doing podcast, where today I have the pleasure of welcoming our inaugural guest, Kevin West, the CEO of Invisible Insights Incorporated in Sugar Creek, Ohio. Kevin is a business advisor, an executive coach, and a trainer. Kevin's also a member of the Professional Business Coaches Alliance and a council member for Forbes. In addition, he's a husband, a father, and as he likes to say, a regular guy doing damage. Kevin's work gives him the opportunity to provide insight and results-based development for his clients, helping them to see the invisibles, those key frameworks behind organizational, personal, and professional growth and success. Welcome to the show, Kevin. It's great to have you here.
Hey, Michael, glad to be here. Very excited.
We're delighted to have you. That's a pretty cool space you're in there. It looks a little bit like an empty fire station or something like that.
It used to be an old machine shop today, and if you were to see the picture, you'd say, wow, this is a huge difference.
Lots of brick. I love it. Well, Kevin, I'm sure our listeners are curious about the invisibles I mentioned in our introduction. Can you give us some insight into some of those frameworks that lead to human growth? Those sound very intriguing.
Yeah, I think the thing is with the invisibles, those are the things that often are underutilized and unseen. And as I started picking up on the success of other people, I started realizing that, wow, you know what? There are different kinds of ways that they see the world. And as I started investigating the way they saw the world, you begin to see the driving principles behind the behaviors. We often try to mimic the behaviors. It's the principles.
Okay. Well, that's great. I love it. Kevin, we've learned that you have some exciting new developments with your business there in Ohio, Invisible Insights. Can you tell us more about those?
Well, I think one thing I'm excited about the most is launching the website. And as a trainer, I'm always excited to see people grow and be a part of that. And so now I get to do a virtual version of this. And in the course of launching the website, we're going to actually produce a free kind of a micro course called the Insights Accelerator, where we break down, how do you cast a compelling vision? How do you do focused work? How do you embrace the grind, right? The grind of that dream that you have. And then how do you take growth from all that and then position yourself as a person of interest? And so that's kind of the whole genre of that. And I'm excited to launch it. Looking really forward to it.
Oh, I can only imagine how excited that is. Launching a website and doing a free micro course. That's great, especially right now with all that's going on in the American economy. It's awfully generous of you to do a free course. It's going to help a lot of people.
Well, I stand on the shoulders of a lot of dudes who I've gotten free stuff from. So
okay, fair.
You stand on mine,
So you're paying it back or paying it forward a little bit. Awesome. Good for you. So Kevin, at what point in your life or your career did you become interested in leadership? Tell our listeners how you became involved in developing leaders.
I used to run a basketball scouting service. And in the course of the basketball scouting service, we always had to go out and try to find people who would sponsor. And we realized early that if we didn't have influence with people, that they weren't in a big hurry. If you can't add value and you don't have influence. Now, I didn't know what those words were or what those meant at the time because I was just a college kid, doing this thing.
Sure.
But the thing, we used to call it playing people. Yeah, Scott, how are we going to play? Me and my partner we would strategize about how we had to build a relationship with people and do it strategically. And then all of a sudden I met somebody and they were doing a leadership training and I called my friend Matt and I go, hey, you know what they call it? We call playing people. They call it leadership. And then it was just
Oh, that's great. Well, that's certainly one of the more unique stories I've heard about how somebody got into developing leaders. Started out with a basketball scouting service. What a great story.
Yeah.
Did you have any leadership mentors along the way, Kevin, who made a big impression or a big investment in you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, college basketball coach, Bill Bachowitz. I would say probably one of the biggest in my early days was a sports agent named Sandy Sanders.
Okay.
And I was kind of a summer guy who would just go for and do whatever. And he taught me many lessons in that world. And working with an African-American guy, working for it, you just, a white kid growing up, where I grew up and being exposed, that was just tremendous for me. It really gave me a taste of a world that I didn't know up front or up close.
Wonderful. Is there anything you'd like to say to those mentors who helped you as you were coming up today while you're on our show?
Well, I'll tell you what, I can't, Bill and Sandy and another guy named Dwight Mason. Those guys were just phenomenal examples. And what I love about all of them is they were all ridiculously free. They were all very comfortable in their own shoes. And if there's one thing I would thank them for is that ridiculous freedom, because it set a tone for me not to be so much concerned and worried about what people think. And it's okay to be who you are and live that truth. And they definitely did that. And that blew me up. That's always been the wind in my sails.
Oh, I love that phrase, ridiculously free. There's some incredible value in people showing you how to set the tone of being open-minded and willing to learn and that sort of thing.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Well, Kevin, I have to imagine that a dynamic leader like yourself must invest in yourself to become a better leader. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about what you're doing to raise the level of your leadership game?
Well, I think the thing that I do, and I did this even as an emerging leader, and I don't even know where I got it from because I've stolen so much from so many people over the years. I got probably inspired. I'm guessing it might have been a Stephen Covey thing. But I've always taken 3% of whatever I earn and put it towards myself and invested it in myself. And now my clients and emerging leaders I work with, I call it the 3% challenge.
Nice.
3%, set it aside, and now what are you going to do with that? How are you going to develop yourself? What are you going to invest in yourself to do? And so they'll do that to this day. Wow,
what a fantastic idea. How's it been going thus far? Can you see a return on your investment in yourself?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the crazy thing about it is, and that's where the Insights Accelerator comes in. When you're able to coalesce the wisdom of a lot of people and compress that and work that together, you stack a whole lot of people's frameworks and their invisibles, and you can get some ridiculous amount of acceleration out of that. And keep yourself and save yourself from a lot of pain at the same time.
Right. Sounds terrific to me. Fantastic. Kevin, as you develop leaders, have you come to some conclusions about 2 or 3 changes that an aspiring leader of the future could make to improve their own leadership skills?
Yeah, there's a couple. I mean, things that I've actually lived by. These are what I would call invisibles. But like Sandy Sanders taught me that, you have to be able to clean the bathroom and walk among kings at the same time.
Okay.
And I never forget, he said one time, he says, Kevin, you're going to be around a lot of professional athletes. And if I ever see you get an autograph from anybody, you'll be fired. And he said, here's the deal. He said, they put your pants on just like you do.
Yeah.
And so walk among kings. And I just always, I've always carried that. But also, the other part of it is really embracing becoming a great number 2. You got to be a great follower if you're ever going to be a great leader.
Sure.
And so I started bumping into people's stories, and as I heard the stories, I discovered that they were phenomenal number 2s, and they embraced all the stuff that comes with being a number 1 through the lens of being a great number 2. So I think that's just been another, one of those things that have always stuck with me. And then the other thing with emerging leaders is I always tell them, focus on being developed before you're being discovered.
Mm-hmm.
So many people are trying to get discovered, and then their curiosity comes off the wrong way. They're curious, if they're curious, they're trying to get discovered in the realm of their curiosity, and it creates sideways energy for them. if they would just be genuinely curious and not so, discerning and not so trying to be a detective and make a point, they could definitely make a bigger difference. And so I just think it's just one of those things where it's like, hey, you're just putting things in the wrong order. That's all.
Right.
And I just think those are some of those things. Emerging leaders have to learn how to question the process, Michael.
Sure.
We're not good at questioning the process, and we got to get better at that. And then we have to behave before we can become. We have to. No one's gonna. I always talk about you have to have be goals, not do goals.
Mm-hmm.
What are you becoming in 2020? What are you
Sure.
becoming in 2021? And then are we setting those things out? Because when you're becoming something, then people receive it and they see it in the way that you want them to see it. And I think that's critical.
Well, there are some great nuggets of wisdom there for our emerging leaders listening to this episode. Thank you, Kevin. I've heard you mention the every great leader needs to have a strong number two.
Oh, yeah.
Ever since I met you 8 or 9 years ago, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. So that's one of my favorite nuggets of wisdom that you just shared. Have you noticed any particular obstacles or perhaps barriers that aspiring leaders tend to get slowed down by or maybe even stuck on?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the mind game is the game, Michael. I mean, that's it. And the level of self-talk that we have right now, we have to manage our self-talk. And so, I always tell emerging leaders there are 4 stages. There's focus. When you start your self-talk, there's a level of focus that you have in there. Mm-hmm. And then it goes to this next part where it is the real actual self-talk. So if my focus is negative, my self-talk ends up coming in play. And all of a sudden that's negative. Now my feelings are going to be negative. I'm going to feel bad. And then my actions. And I'm always telling people, emerging leaders, you got to be able to interrupt the process.
Sure.
The focus, if you go from focus to action, if you will just go focus to action, your feelings are going to follow your actions. So the mantra or the invisible is do the next right thing. What's the next right thing to do?
That simplifies it quite a bit, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Just keep doing the next right thing. And
Marvelous.
then follow, and the self-talk will change.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just a matter of understanding the framework so you can leverage it.
Oh, that's tremendous. Kevin, what's the greatest leadership advice anyone has ever given you?
Man, I tell you what, one of the biggest ones in terms of building and leading teams is the phrase, someone told me this one time, the 5 most important words in leadership are people support what they create. Building context for them. Are you giving the opportunity to evaluate? Are you giving them, what kind of frame are you building for them to feel like they're a part of what you're trying to do? Because it's easy to make decisions, but if you're leading through people, if they're not a part of them, it's going to be really hard for them to connect to those high-level whys that really will drive the behavior.
Awesome. Do you happen to remember who shared that nugget of wisdom with you way back when?
Man, I'm trying to remember. I don't remember.
Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot there. I just thought maybe we could give somebody a shout out today.
Here's what's crazy. All this stuff, when you back all this stuff up, Michael, this is what's beautiful about this. It goes back to like Jim Rohn. It goes back to these iconic guys, John Maxwell. It's the beautiful thing about leadership and the thing that you and I get to do and everybody out there who's listening is they're going to shape stuff. This is all Play-Doh, and it's wonderful because it lives and breathes through the way that we lead and how we grow. And I just think it's cool when you can take all these pieces and put them together and make them your own. Like blocks.
Right. Kevin, do you believe that leaders are born, or do you think someone can be made into a great leader?
My philosophy in that is that their instincts, there are people who are very instinctive and very intuitive in terms of their leadership, and there are people who are very tactical and instructive. There are people who, if you give them the framework, if you let them build the framework out, they'll eventually own their leadership. So I do think there are some people there's a natural bent towards that. But I do kind of like the 10,000 hour rule. I think if you were young and you were a leader when you were young and it's kind of in your DNA, you have that going on. You're going to have it. You got that 10,000 hours before someone who's trying to get their game going. You're a little bit ahead of the curve. But I do believe in time you catch up, because I've seen some dudes passing guys.
Sure.
And that's power. Some dudes get stuck in a pivot. And next thing you know, these emerging guys are passing them by.
So it sounds to me like you're in agreement with me that there are a few born leaders walking around this planet, but that there's also the opportunity for somebody who was not born a leader to grow into it. And you mentioned that, if they just are willing to work at it for 10,000 or so hours, they can become a master of leadership. Am I right?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Kevin, one of my favorite things to talk with leaders about is emotional intelligence, kind of a new discipline that came up in the last 10 or 15 years. How important is emotional intelligence to leadership from your perspective?
I think, Michael, today, now more than ever. And for this reason, the rate of change and one's ability to effectively and emotionally deal with change and be able to really understand how the mourning process works, because we mourn when we go through change. And there are stages of that mourning.
Sure.
There's a book called Managing Transitions by William Bridges. Phenomenal book that talks about all the stages of it. And if you're a leader and you're not dialed in to emotional intelligence and reading the emotions of the people and how people experience change in a world where change is now a value, man, you're going to be way behind. So I would say if you're going to invest in yourself at all, man, I would be signing up for your emotional intelligence deal, man, because I would make sure that I would be dialing myself in on that for sure.
When people are not emotionally intelligent, sometimes they commit what I have often in my life called the career limiting move. Have you ever seen anybody perform one of those in your career?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I do a lot of change management. So there's times where, people are having meltdowns and they don't realize the kind of long-term damage they're doing to their trust, to the trust that they've built. It's funny. You can take a lifetime to build it. In one decision, it can go away.
Right.
All that trust that you built by just having a meltdown and saying things, and you feel like that you're just being transparent, and it's not going to be how it's received.
Yeah. Another friend of ours that is a coach told me that his viewpoint on emotional intelligence is that it's either like a piggy bank where you put quarters in every day for years and then you drop it on the floor and it shatters. Can't put the piggy bank back together. This other acronym is, if that doesn't work for you, think about a sequoia or a redwood tree, right? Yeah. Takes a couple hundred years to grow, but you could cut it down in a day if you wanted to.
Yes.
Emotional intelligence, pretty important stuff.
Very much.
So you're obviously a guy who's invested a lot of time and energy in yourself over the years to become a great leader. Can you help our listeners understand the best single leadership development investment you ever made in yourself?
It's cumulative, Michael. I think every new adventure you go on requires something different from you. In order to achieve something you've never achieved, you have to become someone you've never been. Okay. And so when you're in that world of becoming, you have to be able to expose yourself to things. So I've invested greatly. I think probably one of the biggest investments I've made recently has been joining a mastermind group, spending the cash on a mastermind. That's been big. But I think getting a coach of any kind is huge. And definitely, I think I would recommend that to anybody.
Great. What would you recommend to our listeners about investing in others to help them to develop their skills as great leaders?
Well, I think here's the deal. I think the beautiful thing about investing in other people, it's the default is I have all this knowledge, I need to hoard it, and then I do need to distribute it so others can see how smart I am. When the reality is you got to be ridiculously generous. You got to give away everything you got all the time. And here's the deal. When you do that, it positions you. Positioning is about being first, best, and unique. Well, if the normal default for people is to hoard their knowledge and you're doing the exact opposite, you are going to stand out in a very dark and crazy place, right? You know, you're going to stand out like a shining light. And then all of a sudden now people are going to be attracted to that and you're going to see your influence grow exponentially. And here's the deal. You don't have to know anything. My mentor told me, you don't have to fill anybody's cup. You just have to empty yours.
That's great advice. Love it.
That's what it's all about.
Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful. Thanks for sharing that with us, Kev. So my last question for you, because we're running out of time. You've got a very distinguished record of developing high-performing teams. We think our listeners would like to hear your thoughts about teamwork and collaboration in the workplace. Do you have any observations about how to develop strong teamwork and collaboration within a team?
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I'm going to give you a framework.
Okay.
I think, first of all, you have to establish a compelling, relevant personal vision. You have to know how what you do fits in the goal and the vision of the organization and what your contribution is into that. And then you have to establish the high level whys. Hey, when I do this, why is this important to the big picture? How are those whys? There's a whole lot of, we believe that everybody should experience this or experience that. Then your whole part of that is that's why I do this. That's why, and it reinforces your behaviors. And then obviously, then you want to build context. So you want to have conversations with coworkers about the vision, not just about, most people want to go complain about their job. It's not about complaining about your job. It's about, hey, how can we bring this thing to life even better? And that's taking your problems to your coworkers and sharing, hey, give me an idea. What do you think? And building that level of collaboration. And then after the context, you do evaluation. You invite them in to ask what's right, what's wrong, what's missing, what's confused. And then you create tactical agreement. Tactical agreement is key because without agreement, you can't have accountability. And so once you have agreement with your team, then you have a level of accountability. That accountability is exciting now. It's not something you run from. It's something you run to because everything you did up into that part of it has been all very collaborative and around a bigger picture and a bigger idea. In other words, you're getting out of your own way in the context of your own growth. That is ridiculously cool. And I believe any team that does that regularly becomes a force of nature. They do so much damage, it's not even funny. And that just gets me stoked when I'm around.
I suspect you are right, and I can tell just how stoked you are, my friend. Well, that's all we have time for, leaders of the next generation. We will see you next time when our guest will be Ron Friedman, a business advisor and a yacht captain in his lifetime. Our thanks to Kevin West of Invisible Insights for his insightful comments and recommendations today. Kevin, it was an absolute pleasure having you here with us. And listeners, we will see you next time on the What Are You Doing podcast.
Thanks.
Thank you.